you to know, America, there is a communist conspiracy at work right now. Its job, keep the Overton window out of the #1 New York Times bestseller slot. At the center, some guy named Stieg Larsson. Oh yeah, sure, you may never have heard of him. He's a communist who wrote a bunch of books that everybody loves because he's dead now. But did he really die? That's what they want you to believe. Don't let the communist win. Okay, well, it's not really a conspiracy. Overton window available in bookstores everywhere. All right, we're talking about the oil drill ban from Barack Obama, and the news today that a judge has overturned the ban, but the administration immediately has announced plans to appeal this decision, and they are fighting it tooth and nail. Of course they are. Crime Inc. has a ton of money at stake on this ban. It's how it always works with the progressives. They play the, I'm just looking out for the little guy part, and then you buy it, and then the giant corporations and the uber wealthy end up benefiting from it anyway. Okay, it was what I was just telling you about what was in the book from de Tocqueville, Democracy in America. I mean, he predicted it 150 years ago. They say one thing and do another. Let me give you a specific. 1932, FDR campaigned on stopping the big corporations, and believe it or not, he ran on a conservative platform. Have you ever heard that? He hammered Hoover for overspending, and I quote, taking us towards socialism. The candidate, FDR, promised, quote, strict and impartial enforcement of the antitrust laws to prevent a monopoly and unfair trade and practices, the revision thereof for the better protection of labor and the small producer and distributor. Sounds great until he got into office. Oh, yeah, they were the party of the little guy until he took power. Then he created something, this is Saturday Evening Post, something called the NRA, not the National Rifle Association, the National Relief Act. This suspended the antitrust laws, helping to create monopolies, and the NRA's price controls drove small businesses right out of business because, well, they couldn't afford to, take the hit on items the government had priced, at little or negative profit. That was just the beginning. We know all of the exploits of FDR's big government onslaught with the New Deal, but we never seem to learn that this man actually campaigned on a promise to be a conservative. You see, this is what they do. They promise you anything to get elected. FDR admitted as much to this guy, R.G. Tugwell. This guy, he was part of the FDR administration. He said the key to getting elected would be to tell the regular Democrat what they wanted to hear without using specifics. So that guy would be free to do whatever he wanted when he got in. Kind of like hope and change. Sound familiar? Has anyone noticed that Barack Obama, the candidate, was either non-specific or when he said, let's say he was the candidate, he was against offshore drilling, and he said we needed cap and trade to get elected. Here he is.
When I'm president, I intend to keep in place the moratorium here in Florida and around the country and that prevents oil companies from drilling off Florida's coasts.
Okay. But once he got into office, gas prices were high, and suddenly he was for expanding offshore drilling and cap and trade.
Today, we're announcing the expansion of offshore oil and gas exploration.
I thought he was against it. And now he's trying to ban offshore drilling. I mean, I need a chalkboard to be able to follow this. But now we're stopping drilling. We need cap and trade really bad. That's the one constant here. It's almost like he's just saying whatever he has to and tacking on and cap and trade. And here's another thing. And has anyone noticed that despite all of the progressivism we've had in the last 100 years, that people aren't lifted out of poverty? Ever. Ever. Tell me about the progressives in Philadelphia. Tell me about the progressives in Detroit. Look what they've done to that city. It's because you cannot lift people out of poverty. They need to achieve it themselves. They need a hand up, not a hand out. The government can be a last resort. But if you can't teach someone to fish, you can't just give them fish. De Tocqueville, again. First half, how great America is. We know this part of the story. The second half, the uber rich like George Soros will kick the door shut and create a class system. That is exactly what's happening to democracy in America. Our government has continued to cripple the economy, and I mean, I told you what they were doing to energy. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about the future and a little bit of everything. If we continue to go down this road, we're heading towards Europe, or I don't even know. You know, look how Europe is turning out. Not real good. Neil Ferguson is a professor at Harvard Business School, author of a brand new book, High Financier and the Lives and Times of Sigmund Warbug. I want to get to that here in a second. I mean, no offense. I love geek books. It sounds like it's Geek City. Is it?
Well, not quite, in the sense that financial history shouldn't be just for geeks. We made the mistake of not learning from financial history in the last few years, and look where it got us. And
there was, I mean this in the best way. A good history book is a geek book to me. It is there was a what was it? There was a book out about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, about all the guys who financed or helped finance World War I. Do you remember? Did you read that book by any chance? It was fantastic, fantastic. Learn more from that than I think.
So the name Warburg is famous for that reason alone. Sigmund Warburg came from the Warburg banking dynasty. They were hugely important in Imperial Germany, and then, of course, had to flee when Hitler came to power. And Warburg starts over in London. The reason London's a major financial centre, which it certainly wasn't at the end of World War II, is largely down to Sigmund Warburg. You know, the problem, Glenn, is that historians tend to write books about generals, presidents, and kings. You and I know that bankers are, in fact, just as important and interesting. And I wanted to write a book about a banker who, in fact, wasn't just in it for the money, but had a moral sense.
Okay, is there a lesson, and think about this, because I want to go to, I think we're repeating a lot of the problems that he saw in Weimar Germany.
Yeah.
So is there a lesson in the book to learn from the past, and to be able to say, I had a guy, I call him my deep throat. He was very high up in this whole thing. He was there at all the meetings, and he called me one time and he said, study Weimar.
Yeah.
He thought at the time, and I do, that we're headed for that if we don't turn this ship around. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think Sigmund Warburg spent his life learning the lessons of the Weimar Republic. Lesson number one, if you run enormous deficits year after year, you will end up ultimately with inflation and then hyperinflation. If you do that to the middle class, don't be surprised if they swing to the far right. And if that happens, don't be surprised if your democracy itself is called into question. That's the essence of the Weimar story. And although it seems far-fetched right now, it's not beyond the bounds of possibility that we go down that route, because our fiscal policy at this point looks completely out of control.
Do you see us headed for hyperinflation or a great deflation first and then?
Well, part of the history of Weimar is, of course, that they had both.
Yeah.
And the question is the order in which you get them. The Germans had hyperinflation first, then hyperdeflation. I think we may do it the other way around, in the sense that we're looking at the moment at deflation. Latest inflation numbers are practically zero. We could go further down. I don't know if you're a monetarist, if you track monetary aggregates, but they are in free fall right now, Glenn, and you should look closely at them. They don't publish M3 anymore. That's the broad measure of money. They stopped
I didn't know that's what you called them. What, monetary aggregates?
Right?
Yes,
look
I do.
At the money supply.
Yes.
They don't tell you anymore what broad money is doing in the US because it's really too scary. But right now it's contracting at a rate of more than 5% a year. So I think at the moment the big risk is deflation.
Right.
And that's scary for such a highly indebted economy.
Okay, so this week, so you know, America, we're doing, I think, what is it, Tiffany? Is it Wednesday? Is it tomorrow we're doing the unions? History of the unions tomorrow, and then history of communism on Thursday, and they are very related. The last time I spoke to you, I was in Los Angeles, and we were talking about what was coming in Greece, what was coming in Europe, and I remember everybody at the time, oh, that's crazy talk, I don't ever. Here it comes. Here it comes. How concerned are you with what's coming, what's happening right now in Europe Everybody seems to believe that this is just going to go away and it's going to get better. I don't believe that for a second.
Oh, no, it's a relatively early phase in the crisis where a whole bunch of southern European economies are essentially on the edge of a precipice, or in the case of Greece, already over it. And the problem is partly to do with their banks being insolvent, and it's partly to do with the fact that there is no money to bail out governments anymore. I mean, we're borrowing more in order to borrow more, and it's not a sustainable strategy. The unions play a part in this, Glenn, since you mentioned them, because one of the biggest problems if you're trying to stabilize public finance in Europe is public sector pay and public sector pensions. And it's the public sector where the unions are strongest these days. They were pretty much run out of town in the private sector, except in Scandinavia.